Alright, so we left off last time, Genesis chapter 1, verse 5. Quick recap was that God created the heavens and the earth in the beginning, in the start of time. As we know it, the earth was formless and void, without form and void, as it says, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. He divided the light from the darkness and called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And then it says the evening and the morning was the first day. So we'll go ahead and move forward to verse 6. So verse 6, it says, "And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." That too is actually quite interesting. I know that there's another, the New American Standard Bible translates that, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters." And the Amplified says, "Let that firmament is an expanse of the sky in the midst of the waters." And it's interesting, you think about this, it's like, okay, this is the beginning of time as we know it. God creates the heavens and the earth. The heavens, again, is quite an elusive term in that it's not explicitly described here as such. But yes, it's interesting. So verse 6 describes a firmament. It says that God speaks a firmament into existence by saying, "Let there be a firmament," and in the midst of the waters. It's not stated where these waters came from or what the waters are. We know there's an earth, and so let's move forward. Let's just read through. So verse 6, we'll read it again. "And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." Verse 7, "And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so." This word firmament is rakia in the Hebrew, and they show it meaning extended surface, solid. Expanse, firmament, expanse, flat as base, support. Firmament, a vault of heaven, supporting waters above. Considered by Hebrews as solid and supporting waters above. So it's a solid thing that supports waters. So if we go in with that definition, it says, let there be a firmament, or a solid thing, in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. I'm not sure which waters we're talking about, but it's just waters. Actually, let's see if there's any kind of clarification here. It's the same term for waters. It's mayim in the Hebrew. It says water, waters, water, water of the feet. Could be translated as urine. Of danger, violence, transitory things, refreshment. Well, that's describing water. So, verse 7 says, "And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament." So it's saying God made a solid surface, or a firmament, an expanse, in the midst of the waters. Let it divide the waters from the waters, verse 6, and then verse 7, "And God made the solid thing, or expanse, firmament, and divided the waters which were under that solid thing from the waters which were above that solid thing. And it was so." We'll move forward. Verse 8, "And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so." So verse 8 says, And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. But verse 7 says, and God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. So there's this division of these waters by this solid thing that separates waters now that are going to be below this firmament or solid thing and waters that are going to be above this firmament or solid thing. And I know I've heard it, many people refer to this as, oh, this is the atmosphere, could have been the firmament, other solid scientific terms. It's interesting because we know that when you have clouds in the air or in the sky, if you want to call it that, that's actually waters. And then it rains when those clouds get full and the right conditions occur to cause that cloud to release, or those clouds to release the water that's in it. And then it falls down as what we call rain. But here it alludes to the possibility that there are waters even beyond that, which is an interesting thought, but moving forward. So verse 8, and God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. Now this firmament that he's calling heaven sounds like verse 7's firmament that he said, and God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. So you would think that there was this point that he's calling heaven, but there's not this clarification of detail given, actually. But moving on, so then verse 8 continues, after he calls the firmament heaven, then he says, in the evening and the morning were the second day, and that completes the second day. Then verse 9, and God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. So it's this ground or dry land that's now appearing. And he has spoken this. He says, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. So these waters that are under the heaven, under the atmosphere, if we go with that theory or that thought process for this term, they're gathered into one place. And the thought is that this is on this planet, as we will see in verse 10 apparently. But he gathered these waters into one place, and then he speaks and says, let the dry land appear. So it's this ground, this ground, land that appears above the waters, as it were, so that it can be seen, as it were, above the waters that are on what I would call the earth. So verse 10, and here I'm calling it earth because verse 10, God is going to call it earth. And verse 10 says, and God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. So now we have this earth that God created. He brought about, he spoke light into existence, and there was light. Then he separated the light from the darkness. He called the darkness night, and he called the light day. So there's this establishment of time, as I would see it, and a delineation in that time. So now he separates light from darkness, and he now is saying when the light has completed its cycle of time that he's determined, after the darkness has completed its cycle, then that will become one day. And that was the evening and the morning of the first day. And the second day, evening and morning as it were, God speaks this firmament and separates these waters from waters, and he speaks dry land. It has the dry land come up from the waters that are now on the earth, and he calls that dry land earth as we gather here, based off of what's being said in verse 10 in the beginning portions. And then he gathers together the waters that are on the earth or around the land on the planet earth, and he calls those waters seas, or we may call them oceans or such, as I would conclude. And it says, and God saw it was good. And now we see that once again, that statement of God saw it was good, which we saw on the first day. It's interesting though, on the second day he didn't specifically identify or say that it was good. So when he called the firmament heaven and he had divided the waters from the waters, and made a firmament that which divided the waters from the waters, on the second day, there was no declaration of it being good as such, like we saw in day 1, and how we're seeing here in day 3, after he's called the dry land earth and gotten the dry land, spoke the dry land to appear, or commanded the dry land to appear, and separate basically, or have a delineation between the dry land and the waters. And then after calling the dry land earth and calling the sea, the waters that he gathered together seas, he saw it was good. And actually, let me clarify, because in verse 4, it wasn't that he saw that the day was good. He saw that the light was good. Because it says in verse 4, and God saw the light that it was good. So he's declaring that the light is good in verse 4 from his first day of creation, after creating time as we know it. And then in verse 10, God saw that it was good, in the it, based off the context and how it's applied in the sentence structure, is saying that the land, which he called earth, the dry land, and the gathering of together of the waters, which he called seas, that it was good. So verse 11, and God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself, upon the earth. And it was so. So now he's created light, separated the light from the darkness, began this declaration in this identification of a day by this first evening and morning time period that has elapsed, if you will, for the first day. Then on day 2, the second time period, after he's established this time period of a day, of an evening and a morning, the second one of this, since he's created this time period, as we know it here, in he creates a firmament that separates, that's in the midst of the waters, and divides waters that are above that firmament and are below that firmament. Then in day 3, he let the waters under the heaven, he gathers the waters under the heaven and commands the land to come up and appear dry, or that is, to be dry, basically to be as it were, separated from the waters, so that it's no longer wet. Because when you have something that's wet, it's because water is on it. But now the water has been separated from this land that he's called earth. And it's dry, and he calls it dry land. He says it's dry land. Well, he says it's dry land, and he calls it earth. And then after that happens, then he sees that he looks at it and saw that it was good. That's stated in verse 10. And then in verse 11, he said, let the earth bring forth grass, and the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself, upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, verse 12, and the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. So there's a lot that seems to happen in this third day, relatively speaking, as such. So in this third day, we have God on the third day says, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together in one place, dry land appear. And also in that same day time period, he calls the dry land earth, and the gathered waters he calls seas. He saw that it was good, proclaims that it was good in that day, and still he continues on. He says, let the earth bring forth grass, and herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after its kind, whose seed is in itself. And the earth did so as he had commanded. And these things come forth after their own kind, and God saw that it was good. And then it says, in the evening and the morning were the third day, on verse 13. So this third day, he's called the dry land, that is, as it were, separated the dry land from the waters, or the seas, as we would call it, or oceans. Then he speaks into existence, and he causes the dry land to produce or bring forth grass, fruit trees, and herbs yielding seed, and the fruit which has its seed in itself. And then after these things are so, then he sees and looks and says, this is good. And that's good. So we'll continue on next time and move forward in verse 14 after the third day, and we'll start the fourth day next time. Thanks for joining me.